Welcome to LUTV News InFocus, where we feature interesting topics on campus, in the community, and in the world of culture. I'm Jonathan Tippett. Former LUTV News anchor and University Press multimedia editor Trevier Gonzalez honed his craft for storytelling and journalism during his time at Lamar University. Now Gonzalez is a photojournalist for KRQE in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Most recently, he has covered protests in Albuquerque in the wake of the death of George Floyd. Trevier is here to share his experiences as a part of the media covering this story and give insight on how aspiring multimedia journalists should prepare for the industry. Trevier, good to see you.
Jonathan, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's been a while since we've talked like this. Under such formal circumstances, too. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing in your day-to-day job, particularly right now, given coronavirus and protests, and there's a lot going on in the world of news.
Yeah, right now it's a really interesting time to be working within the news industry. Like you had mentioned, coronavirus had really changed the game in terms of how we cover news. Of course, you might see in broadcasts even where you're at, people are using these boom pole microphones and as a means to social distance. And at our own station, things that would have happened is I'm not even allowed to go into my station for the most part, just because I'm out in the field. You know, even though I'm wearing a mask, I'm still interacting with the public, and we're just kind of all separated out just so that we don't introduce any potential infection to the station. But an interesting point is, on top of all of that, how the death of George Floyd has just affected the entire nation. And it's definitely caused our station to put in a lot more precautions in terms of the way we cover things, the way we even dress and go to a news environment. If you want me to sort of elaborate on that, which I think you're about to ask, is like, it's something very uncanny. The first thing of the many rules that were implemented is no more station logos, no more big TV cameras. And this is kind of as a means to, it's really weird because we don't want to wear station logos anymore so that potential, maybe even aggressive protesters, they don't come toward the media. We're using unmarked cars most of the times. And that's just because you've probably seen many of the videos happening out in Minnesota, and some of that has happened here. What I'm talking about specifically is how they call it rioting. And in downtown Albuquerque, I was there. It was a Sunday evening whenever peaceful protests started. And I had just seen our helicopter was up there covering it. And as a result, I saw how close it was to home. And I just, as you might see in the photos, I just grabbed my camera and started just capturing this, because this is really history in the making, not just within the nation, but this city as a whole. I've never seen anything this large, as many protests as I might have covered. And so just going out here and seeing how this took over our downtown central street, it was impressive and once again peaceful. But as the night, started coming in and that group disbanded, I started listening to our police scanner, and I heard a lot more sirens. And this is when I took my second trip outside. And that's when I noticed that things were getting a little bit more dicey. Just no more real police presence at any of these things. And once again, downtown, where I would normally, go to eat or just hang out, was now being destroyed essentially by people with tire irons breaking windows. And it was just a little bit scary, even as a civilian, seeing what was happening. But I felt a duty to show what was happening to these businesses. And at that point, that's when things really set in, that things were getting a little bit more serious and a lot more real.
That's a good point, is that oftentimes a journalist, your job is just kind of to be there. Your job is to just show what's happening. And to do that, you have to be there yourself. and situations can between protests that have gone violent to police action that has overstepped its boundaries and become violent. There's a lot of risk that takes attending something like this. How do you find that responsibility on you? Like, how do you feel like is a good middle ground to fulfill your journalistic duty and to also maintain safety?
Even before this, I've always been instructed to kind of choose my battles, and that's both when you're acting with certain members of the public as well as police. Here at the station, I'm kind of known for an advocate, as someone who might even push the boundaries, but it's just because I know what's within my legal rights as both a civilian and a journalist, and that's something I continue to fight for and teach others about.
The media, you're arresting someone.
Go that way.
You're arresting someone.
This is unlawful. Go that way.
I'm with the media.
Back.
I have to cover this arrest.
Back
Are you kidding me?
Don't step up to the line or you will get pushed out.
With Channel 13.
I don't care.
But in terms of finding that line, I think it just comes out, I tell this to police, I'm just doing my job. And I try to approach both law enforcement and the public with a level of respect, letting them know that it's my job to inform. Just, it's my job.
Go that way. Go that way. Go that way. I'll leave you. Huh?
You need to go.
Go that way, huh? Just go. Whoa.
Go.
You're not welcome, dog. You're not.
Go.
Sometimes you'll get pushed around, and when that happens, that's a little bit disheartening. But at the end of the day, especially during these tense moments, you don't really have time to kind of self-loathe on these negative experiences, because you probably have a certain hit you have to make, whether it's for a live shot or getting your package or story in. There's no real time to focus on someone being rude to you, because at the end of the day, no matter what happens, you have a story to tell and you have a deadline to make. And what really set this in for me was, like I said, whenever those protests had happened and started getting aggressive, the next day, follow-up protest. And as a result, what had happened was certain people found the images that I took, which were completely fair photos, and just within a very particular group, they assumed I was impeding on someone's rights by showing their faces and saying that I was helping law enforcement. And I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of that, but essentially that's when stuff started getting real, because some person pushed me and my camera and damaged it to a point where we now made the call where we're not going to use big cameras. We're either going to use cell phones or DSLRs, something that's lighter and allows us to blend in with the people. Once again, trying to do our job and trying to just make the safest way for that possible. And since we're wearing masks and we're not wearing station logos, essentially we kind of look like civilians anyway.
Do you think that versus like big national media, which I would say is usually what people have a problem with whenever they say the media, they're like these big national news outlets that put a lot of their own opinion on things, versus a local news outlet. Would you say that typically a local news outlet is more on the just reporting news versus kind of perpetuating this stereotype of like fake news and the media causing more issues than it's worth? Like, what's your whole opinion on that whole opinion that the public has?
I feel like the public within my city, generally there's a lot more respect kind of with us, because we're the same people they see through the good and bad. Even when we're interacting with city officials, we're the same photographers who are miking up the mayor. And I feel like generally there is that kind of respect. At the same time, even with the coronavirus protests that had happened here, people are just really quick to see, once you have a large camera, you're part of a larger media outlet, and they're quick to shout fake news or be somewhat aggressive or just down talking you in some way. And it's a little bit tough. Ethically, it's a little bit of a challenge just because I do look at the whole George Floyd protests and what has happened. I think if we're being honest with ourselves, standing back from it all, there have probably been more exposure to those negative instances of these people rioting. And I feel like that can easily make things feel a little bit unsettling for certain communities, because it makes it feel like we're giving an eye to the people who are causing the negative. When in fact, I don't know, if you go into each specific outlet, we're probably trying to outline the positives as much as we can. At the same time, we can't sugarcoat what has happened in our city. Businesses were destroyed, if not destroyed, really affected. And we kind of have to hit this fine line of being honest, but also trying to be positive. A lot of times whenever, let's say, a mass shooting or a really bad homicide happens here, be like, you're only here to cover the negative. And it's like, well, actually we're here during the positives too. It's a little bit more noticeable just because, I don't know, it's a little bit tough.
You have to make it known that this event happened. And there's no political issue in saying that if a building was broken into during a protest, that happened. That's not a thing that changed. But people think that is taking a particular stance or trying to paint something in a negative light.
Right. And
so, just real quick, we're almost out of time, but I did want to ask one last thing. How did your time at Lamar kind of prepare you for this, or what did it gear you towards getting ready for this kind of thing? Because I mean, you were in classes with me, and I can say that you were definitely pretty adventurous even then, and you kind of wanted to cover the more like offbeat or gritty kind of stories.
Yeah, I know. Even with Shaylin, we would adventure to Houston to cover really serious topics. I remember at that time it was something dealing with sexual assaults and very real stuff. And I would say LUTV sort of gave me the experience to go beyond my college, go beyond the city of Beaumont, and kind of just prepare me in being able to tackle these things. At the same time, it does take a lot of self-starterness. I'm not sure if that's a word, but it took a lot of
it is
of our own life. Great. And I guess I would add, to clarify, Albuquerque, something that we have realized and kind of known is, in terms of having a large African-American community, we don't really have that. There's certainly many who have come up and we've been able to talk to and have brought it up, like, yeah, there's not that many African Americans here, but at the same time, we still have a voice, and we still have something to say. But I would also say the fact that these people who are not Black are still coming up to this and discussing and having these conversations and these many protests, I think that says a lot. But I guess I would add that the diversity of Lamar and Beaumont and what they're having kind of allows me to, the fact that I've been able to talk to anybody, regardless of race, religion. I mean, we've done even we've covered the Jewish community over there, both of us. So I think we've kind of been prepared to step into any element and at least be able to have a conversation with someone. And I think that's important.
All right. Thank you, Trevier. And thank you for joining us on LUTV News InFocus. To see more content from LUTV News, follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. See you next time.